So today we're going to be talking about subtracting integers. Our essential question for today is going to be, how are adding integers and subtracting integers related? So by the end of today, we're going to be subtracting with a whole lot of integers, and we're going to start working with some real-life problems. So the process of subtracting integers is related to adding integers, because when we are subtracting in integers, it is the same as adding the opposite. So when we look at this, we see 3 minus 4. And that's going to be the same as 3 plus negative 4. Now we can remember from yesterday, as we are adding 3 plus negative 4, it's going to end up being equal to negative 1. So what I want to draw your attention over here is, we can say that subtracting a positive number is going to be the same as adding a negative number. So subtracting this positive 4 is the same as adding this negative 4 right here. It's the same thing. And it's the same the other way as well. When we're subtracting a negative number, it's the same as adding a positive number. Now as we look through this, we can say, okay, let's check this out on a number line. When we're subtracting 4 from 3, our first step is to get to 3. And it's the same for both of those equations, 3 minus 4 and 3 plus negative 4. So once we get to 3, the start of our equation, we can then add negative 4, or we can subtract 4 from that location, which means we're going to be moving 4 to the left. So when we subtract 4, or when we add negative 4, we're moving in the same direction along our number line. What that means is that since we are adding its opposite, or subtracting that 4 and then adding that negative 4, we can get to the same location on our number line. So essentially what was going on is adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. And we can start looking at this to make it really easy on ourselves and figure out the best way to get to that answer. Okay, so we're going to be subtracting integers. First, over here we can see we have 3 minus 12. So there's two ways that we can look at this. We can say, okay, we're looking at this as 3 minus 12. So we have our number line right here. We can say, okay, here's my number line. I'm going to put 0 like right here, and I'm going to go over to positive 3. We can go 1, 2, 3. Here is positive 3. Now I'm taking away 12. As I take away 12, what I need to go is 12 in this direction. So once I hit 12 in this direction, I can see that I'm going to end up over here at negative 9. Okay, now we can also look at this in another way. Since we can look at this as adding its opposite, we can say, oh, well, 3 minus 12 is going to be the same as 3 plus negative 12. And we remember from yesterday, when we're adding that negative 12, we can say, oh, well, the absolute value of this 12 is bigger than this 3, so we can think of it as 12 minus 3, which is going to be 9. And then we're going to keep the sign of that bigger absolute value. So that's going to be equal to negative 9. So we can rewrite this problem, because this problem right here is the same as this problem right here. They're going to get us to the same location on our number line. We can just figure out which one of those is going to be easier for us to process. Okay? Now, when we're looking at this second problem here, we have negative 8 minus negative 13. So as we have negative 8 minus negative 13, we can think, okay, well, subtracting a negative number is going to be the same as adding a positive number. So let's go ahead like this and turn this into a giant plus sign. So now we have negative 8 plus 13. So if we want to come over here, we can draw in our number line right here, and we can say, here we go at 0. Now we have to get to negative 8, so we're going to come this direction over this way, and we're going to come all the way over to negative 8. Okay, and then when we're adding this positive 13, we're going to come back in this direction by 13 units. And so really what we're saying is we're going to have to cancel out all of this movement that we did right here. So 13 minus 8 is actually going to be 5. So we came over here to positive 5. So our answer is going to be 5. Now, as we look at this, again, we can think of it like we had yesterday. We had our absolute value of 13 is going to be bigger than the absolute value of 8. So we can think of it as subtraction and say 13 minus 8 is going to be 5. And since 13 was our bigger absolute value, that means this is going to be a positive number because we're going to end up with more positives than we have negatives because we had more positives up here with that 13 than we had negatives with 8. And in our last problem right here, we have 5 minus negative 4. Well, again, because we're minusing a negative, that's going to be the same as adding a positive. So we can put this minus a negative into a giant plus sign right there, and we can say 5 plus 4. Well, that's going to be equal to 9, because subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive, and we know that 5 plus 4 is equal to 9. Okay, so we're going to continue our example with subtracting integers. We now have 8 minus 10. So when we are looking at 8 minus 10, we can look at this as subtracting a positive 10. Okay, so if we want to subtract a positive number, that's the same as adding a negative number. So we have 8 plus negative 10. So I have 8 positives, I have 10 negatives. I can think about those as different groups and they're going to cancel each other out. I can think of 10 as having 2 more negatives than the 8 has, and so as we cancel out all of those 8, we're going to be left with 2 negatives left, so we're going to have an answer of negative 2. Or we can go 10 minus 8 is going to be 2. Since 10 was negative right here, that means its answer has to be negative. So negative 10 plus 8 is going to be negative 2. Now as we come in here to negative 3 minus negative 6. Again, subtracting a negative number is going to be the same as adding a number, a positive number. So as we look at this, we can say this is just going to be a giant plus sign. Now I have negative 3 plus 6. So again, we could look at this on a number line, and we could say, okay, here is 0. I'm going to start at negative 3, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Here is negative 3. And then I can come 6 in that positive direction, so I need to go this way. Okay, so that would be 3, and this would be 3, which would be my 6 in the positive direction. So right here, I'm going to end up at positive 3. So my answer here is going to be positive 3. Okay, or if we wanted to do it another way, we could say here, my absolute value of 6 is bigger than my absolute value of negative 3. So let's just subtract 6 from 3, or 3 from 6. It's going to be 3. My absolute value of the bigger number was positive, which means this is going to be a positive number right here. Now, as we look at this last one right here, we have 2 minus a negative 4. And when we're subtracting a negative number, it's just like adding a positive number. So we have 2 plus 4, which is equal to 6. So as we look at this, again, we could put this on our number line, and we can say, okay, here I am at 0. I need to go 1, 2, and this is going to be at positive 2. Now, when I'm subtracting a negative number, that means I'm going to be making it less negative or more positive, which means I need to keep coming in this direction. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'm making it less negative, because I'm taking those negatives away. I'm making it more positive, which makes this 6, because I've now gone this 4 right here, and I've gone this 2 right here. And my answer is going to be 6. Okay, go ahead and try these on your own first. Go ahead and pause the video, and after you're done, go ahead and make sure that your work lines up with mine. Okay, there's many different ways to solve each of these problems. Let's go ahead and check that we're getting the same answers though. So go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so for problem number 1, we have 8 minus 3. Well, that's a pretty standard problem. Okay, so we're going to say 8 minus 3. They're both positives. It's straight up forward. So we're going to say 8 minus 3 is going to be equal to 5. Now, we look at here, we have 9 minus 17. Well, we can think about this in terms of money, and we can say, well, I have $9 and I have to pay someone $17, so I need to figure out how much debt I owe. Okay, so we can say, I'm going to figure out this by saying 9 plus negative 17. Okay, because now it's an addition problem. We've worked with addition problems before. And I can say, okay, well, if I'm going to add this right here, well, I know the absolute value of 17 is bigger, so I can now take 17 minus 9, and that's going to go ahead and give me 8. Now, because the bigger of my absolute values was negative inside, that means my number is going to be 8. So I can say negative 8 for my answer. Okay. The other way that we can look at this is on a number line, and we can say, okay, I'm going to start here at 0. I'm going to come this way by 9, which is going to get me to positive 9 here. But then I have to go in this direction by 17. Okay, so if I'm starting here and I need to go all the way in this direction by 17, that means that I have to cancel out 9 of that 17 because we're backtracking across these 9 right here. So all that's left here is this 17 minus 9. The only distance that I'm not backtracking across is this distance right here. So that's my other 8 in that 17. So that 8 comes from right there. Okay, it's that other piece of distance, and we end up right here at negative 8. Okay? Then for problem number 5, we have negative 3 minus 3. So right here, when we're looking at negative 3 minus 3, we can think of that as subtracting a positive or adding a negative. So we have negative 3 plus negative 3. So since we can say subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative, we can say that negative 3 plus negative 3 is going to be more negative. It's going to become negative 6 because these have the same signs. We can treat it like regular addition, just making sure that it has the same or common sign at the very end. Then for problem number 2, we can come look down here. We can say, okay, we're at negative 14 and we want to take away 9. Well, we can rewrite this and say we're subtracting a positive number. So we can say, okay, here I am at negative 14, and I actually am going to add a negative 9 because subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative. So as I look at this, negative 14 plus negative 9, these have the same symbols now, or same signs now, which means we can treat it like a regular addition problem. So as we look at this, we can say 14 plus 9 is going to be 23. And then we're going to keep the common sign of our two numbers here, so it's going to become negative 23. Now in problem number 4 here, we're going to see 9 minus negative 8. So subtracting a negative number is going to be the same as adding a positive number. So 9 plus 8 is going to be 17. And finally, down here we have negative 12 minus negative 12. Again, subtracting a negative number is going to be the same as adding a positive number. So subtracting negative, we're going to turn this into a giant positive sign right here. So we're going to say negative 12 plus 12. Well, that's going to be the same as adding an opposite. And remember from yesterday, as we add opposites, they're actually going to cancel each other out because I have 12 negatives here, I have 12 positives here. Negatives and positives cancel each other out. So I can say negative 12 plus 12 is going to be 0. So for this one, we're going to be subtracting with multiple integers because in real life, we don't always just have two numbers. We have more than two numbers to work with a lot of the time. So there's a variety of different ways that we can work through these. One of those ways is just to go right to left. So we can say negative 7 minus negative 12. So as we look at this, this minus a negative right here is going to be the same as addition of a positive. So we can say this is going to be one giant positive sign. So negative 7 plus 12. Okay, so we think about this, we can put this out on a number line. And we can say, here we go, we got 0 right here. I want to go back to negative 7, so I'm going this direction by 7. And I'm going to end up right here at negative 7. Now I have to add 12 to this. So I'm going to start right here, and now I'm going 12 in this direction right here. That's going to be 12 in this direction. So this 7 is canceling out this part of that 12. So 12 minus that 7 that's canceled out is going to give me 5 more in this direction right here, because this 7 right here canceled out part of that, and I'm going to get another 5 out of this 12. So I can say that's going to bring me to 5. Okay, now that's the first part of this. Now the next part of this is we can say, now that we're at our 5, because negative 7 plus 12 is 5, we're going to have 5 minus 14. So starting again at that 5, we now need to go 14 back in this direction. Okay, so as we go 14 back in this direction, what we can see is happening here as we go 14 back this way is 5 minus 14 is going to take us all the way back down here to negative 9. Okay, because that 14 is going to cancel out all of that 12, which took us all the way back to that negative 7. And we're still going to have 2 more to go, which is going to take us back to that negative 9. So that can be a little bit complicated to look at as we're going through into a number line. So let's go ahead and look at it in another way. Let's try it algebraically. Okay, so we can say, okay, we're going to add the opposite of 12. Again, we're just going to turn that minus a negative 12 into adding a positive 12. And then we're going to add negative 7 and 12, which is going to give us to that 5. So we still have that minus 14 because we haven't touched it yet. So we have minus 14 here. We still have that minus 14 here. So we only combined our negative 7 and our positive 12, which came down here and gave us our 5. So after that step there, we're going to say, oh, we can add the opposite of 14 because subtracting a positive is the same as going to be adding a negative. So we have 5 plus negative 14, which gives us negative 9. So negative 7 minus negative 12 minus 14 is going to be equal to negative 9. So here we are at our second example of subtracting multiple integers. So we can see we have negative 11 minus 5 minus negative 8. So as we look at this, we can go ahead and start working at this right to left. So we can look at this minus 11 minus 5 first, and we're going to ignore this piece right now because we're only going to work with 2 numbers at a time. So now as we look at this, we can say negative 11 minus 5. Well, subtracting this positive 5 is going to be the same as adding a negative number. So we can say negative 11 plus negative 5 is the same as this negative 11 minus positive 5. Well, now since these two numbers have the same sign, we can say, well, negative 11 plus negative 5 is just going to become negative 16. Then, because we haven't touched this yet, we still have to bring all of this down. So we have to still say negative 16 minus negative 8. So again, we have negative 16 minus a negative number. Well, minus a negative number is actually going to be the same as adding a positive number. Make that a giant plus sign. So we can say negative 16 plus 8. So when we look at this, we can say, okay, well, negative 16 is going to become less negative when we add a positive to it, so it's actually going to become smaller. So we can say negative 16 plus 8 is going to become negative 8. Okay. Now, if we wanted to look at this on a number line, okay, we could draw out our number line over here, and we could say, okay, here is a 0 right here. Now to start off with, we're going to go ahead and go over to our negative 11. So we've got to go over by 11 in that negative direction to get to this negative 11 here. Now we're going to be subtracting a positive number. As we subtract a positive number or as we add a negative number, we're going to continue in this direction by another 5, which takes us out to negative 16. And then as soon as we look at this, we're going to be subtracting a negative 8. So we're going to become less negative because we are subtracting a negative number. So as we are subtracting a negative number, it's the same as adding a positive number. So we're going to move back in this direction by 8. And as we move back in this direction by 8, we're going to go over from 16 down to negative 8. Okay, go ahead and try these ones on your own first. Go ahead and pause the video. After you're done working them out, go ahead and resume the video to see if your answers are going to match up with my answers here. So as we look at this, we have negative 9 minus 16 is minus 8. So again, we can start with this going from right to left, and we can say, okay, here I have negative 9 minus 16. So that negative 9 is actually going to be the same as plussing a negative 16 to this, and that minus 8 is going to be the same as plus a negative 8 to that, because when we're subtracting positive numbers, it's going to be the same as adding negative numbers. So now as we look at this, we have a negative 9 plus a negative 16 plus a negative 8. And so since it's all addition and it's all with negative numbers, we're just going to add all of these together. So negative 9 plus negative 16 is going to bring us up to negative 25. plus that negative 8 because we haven't done anything with it yet. So that negative 25 plus that negative 8 is going to bring us up to negative 33. Then for problem number 8, we can see we have 0 here, minus 9, minus a negative 5. So that minus a negative is going to bring this into a positive right here. So we can say, okay, well, I have 0 minus 9 plus 5. Well, 0 minus 9 is going to end up being negative 9. So negative 9 plus 5 is going to be negative 4. Now in problem number 9, we have 15 minus negative 20 minus 20. So again, we can look at this and say, oh, well, I'm subtracting a negative, so that's going to be the same as adding a positive. So I can say this is going to be adding positive 20. And now I can say, oh wait, adding positive 20 and subtracting 20 is going to cancel each other out. Since those cancel each other out, my answer is just going to be 15. Then for problem number 10, we have negative 4 minus 20 minus 9. So again, we can look at this as subtracting a positive. So we can say subtracting a positive, same as adding a negative. So negative 4 plus negative 20 plus negative 9. And now since it's all addition and all addition with the same signs, we can now say negative 4 plus negative 20 is going to be negative 24. And then plus that negative 9. So negative 24 plus negative 9 is going to get us to negative 33. Then with problem number 11, we can see negative 8 minus negative 6 minus 0. So when we're subtracting 0, we're not changing anything, so we can actually get rid of that. We can ignore it. Now we look at this, negative 8 minus negative 6. So we can look at this and say, oh, minus negative is going to be the same as adding a positive. So negative 8 plus 6 is going to become less negative. It's going to become more positive. So negative 8 plus 6 is going to be a negative 2 because I have 2 more negatives than I have in my positive 6. That negative 8 still holds weight, so it's going to be a negative 2. And finally here on this 12, we can say negative 14 minus 9 minus 36. Again, subtracting this positive number here and subtracting this positive number here. So we can say negative 14 plus negative 9 plus negative 36 is going to be the same as negative 14 minus 9 minus 36. So again, we can treat this like regular addition, and we can say negative 14 plus negative 9 is going to take me to negative 23 plus that negative 36, because I haven't done anything with it yet. It needs to be brought down. So now we can add these two numbers together because, again, they still have the same signs out front, so we can treat it like regular addition. So we can say 6 and 3 makes 9, and 3 and 2 makes 5. So I can end up with negative 59 for my answer. So for example 3 here, we have a real-life application of this. So we can talk about which continents have the greatest range of elevations. Now by range of elevations, what they're talking about is going from the highest peak on the highest mountain in that continent and then going how far down is it to the lowest valley in the lowest part of that continent. When we want to know the distance or the change in altitude between those 2 points. So that's what it's talking about by the range of elevations. So the highest elevation in North America is going to be at 6,198 meters, and the lowest elevation in North America is actually at negative 86 meters. Then in Africa, we can say, okay, we have the highest point being at 5,895 meters, and we can have our lowest elevation at negative 155 meters. So now we want to look at this and figure out which one of these 2 continents, North America or Africa, has the greatest range of elevations. So we want to figure out how far it is from the highest point in the continent down to the lowest point in the continent for each of these two things. And to be able to do that, we can subtract the lowest elevation from the highest elevation. So when we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and take 6,198 meters and subtract negative 86. That's going to give us our range in North America. So as we look at 6,198 and we're minusing 86, we can think of it as adding a positive. So we can say 6,198 plus that 86 feet, and that's going to take us up to 6,284 meters. Then in Africa, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find its range and say we're starting at 5,895 feet. We're going to subtract its lowest elevation, so it's going to be minus that negative 155 meters. And then we're going to say, okay, we're going to say that's the same as adding a positive number, so 5,895 plus 155. And that's going to be equal to 6,050 meters. So as we look at these two numbers, we can then compare these two numbers, and we can see that 6,284 is wider or larger of a gap than 6,050 meters. So from the highest point in North America to the lowest point in North America is a greater distance than from the highest point in Africa to the lowest point in Africa. And by distance, I mean altitude change. Now, because 6,284 is greater than 6,050, North America has that greater range of elevations. So for our extra example here, we're now going to be looking at South America, and we're going to be looking at Europe, and we're going to be comparing their ranges. So for South America's range, we're going to be doing it the same way. We're going to set up the problem in the same way. We're going to take the highest elevation and we're going to subtract the lowest elevation to check on that greater range of elevations. So we're going to look at this. We're going to have 6,960 minus negative 40, and that's 6,960 meters above and then 40 meters below sea level. So we're going to look at this and we're going to say, okay, 6,960 minus negative 40, well, that's the same as adding a positive. So we're going to say 6,960 plus a positive 40. So as I add those together, I get 7,000 meters for the range in South America. Then as we look at Europe, okay, the Europe range is going to be equal to 5,642 meters, okay, and we're going to go ahead and subtract that negative 92 meters. So as we look at that, we can say that's going to be 5,642 plus that 92. Okay, and it's just easier for me to do this vertically, so we go in 5, 6, 4, 2, plus 9, 2. We're going to see this is going to be 4. This is going to be 13, so I got to carry my 1, so I'm going to see 5,734. So this European range is going to have a change in elevation from negative 92 up to 5,642, and that's going to be 5,734 meters. So as we look at this and we can start comparing these two right here, oh, forgot my little label right there, we can say, okay, the greater number here is going to be this 7,000 meters is greater than this 5,734 meters. So South America has a greater range in its elevations. So I want you to try this on your own. Go ahead and pause the video and work this out on your own. And then after you have worked this out, go ahead and press play and see whether or not your answers match up with mine. So as we look at this, we can see the highest elevation in Mexico is going to be 5,700 meters on Pico de Orizaba. The lowest elevation in Mexico is going to be negative 10 meters in Laguna Salada. So we're going to find the range of elevations in Mexico. So as we look at this, we're going to set it up the same way. We're going to say the Mexican range is going to be equal to its highest altitude, which is going to be 5,700 meters. And we're going to subtract that negative 10 meters that it gets in Laguna Salada. So as we look at this, we can say, okay, we have 5,700 minus this negative 10. Minusing a negative number is going to be the same as adding, so it's 5,700 plus 10, and that's going to be equal to 5,710. and 10. And so as we look at this, 5,710 meters is going to be the range in Mexico's elevation. Okay, we're on our last slide here for our mini assessment. If you'll go ahead and put your work in your notes so that on Friday I can come by and check that you have the answers for this. And that will be it for today. Thank you for working with me.